You're recording? Okay.
I don't do well.
So, we are going to start with the Pledge of Allegiance. Let's see who hasn't done that. Glenn, have you
Did you see
this?
this piece from me?
Yeah.
All right, Glenn will lead us.
Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, we'll do roll call.
Nola Judd. Present. Ken Hayes.
Here.
Ron Bell.
Here.
Sue Ford. Here. Ted Miller.
Present.
Norma Turner. Here. Maggie Roth. Here. Steve Burke.
Here.
Celinda Barkas. Here. Glenn Wiggins.
Here.
Connie Bobet. Present. Barbara Christensen. Present. Rod Fleck.
Present.
Mike Doherty. Don Corson.
Here.
So, we have 100% tonight?
Rod's out of view. Oh, there he is.
So next we have requests for modifications or approval of the agenda. One modification I'd like to add is to, after the minutes, after correspondence, just have the executive committee meeting report, which has been distributed on your desk. Any other additions? Let's see, Sue, you had something you wanted to add? No. Ron, did you have something you wanted to add to the minutes?
No.
Okay.
The agenda?
I'm scared of the agenda.
No.
Okay. Anybody else? Mike?
So it's okay, I'd like to add that single day handout about the public meeting, public service request after this, as part of the subcommittee reports at the end as we did last time.
Okay. Yeah, I'll put you in here. Put Mike Doherty's page. Okay, anything else? Okay, hearing no other modifications, I'll call for approving the agenda as mentioned.
Move to approve. Second. Barbara.
Moved by Connie, seconded by Barb. Any further discussion? Hearing none, those in favor?
Aye.
And
Aye.
opposed? Thank you. Okay, did you all, have you had a chance to review the minutes? If not, we will stop for a minute or two while you review them. Figure out where mine went. Does everybody have the minutes?
Yes.
Okay. Rod, did you get the minutes? Rod? Rod?
I'm trying to pull them up.
Okay.
I sent a link with all the attachments, and I sent one that was just the minutes.
Yeah, but I'm pulling up the link with all the attachments. It's just in the courtroom here, it takes a little while to download the file.
Okay. So while, okay, let's take then a couple minutes. Let us know, Rod, when you have those.
Okay.
Norma,
Mm-hmm.
could I check with Trish and see if she has another copy of this? I did not get mine printed off.
Your agenda?
Yeah.
There are extra copies, I remember,
Yes.
always. Did it work for you, Ron?
It's still downloading. I will be fine if you guys want to move forward with the adoption of the minutes. That won't bother.
If you'd like, we can postpone that discussion until later in the agenda? So you have
Yeah,
time.
based on this, I'd say I've got 2 more minutes.
All right, well, how about then we move the approval of the minutes down to after the financial report. Does that sound all right?
Great.
Okay. Okay, so Trish, your correspondence?
I have 3 from Pearl Louise Hewitt, who expressed displeasure about how correspondence is being handled. She wants all the correspondence and public comments to be online. Lois Perry sent me 3, which were all what her testimony was in the meeting on April 6th. And then I have some from Steve Burke that just have to do with joining meetings and joining committees, subcommittees, and the like. And then Norma forwarded one from Rob Robertson regarding the DCD position. And then Stephanie Noblin sent a link to the YouTube video for the 6th. And in working through all of my paper, and I have lots of it, I found some things that should have gone on the 6th and did not go. One is a CD from Ed Bowen, and I had previously provided to all of the Charter Review Commission. Stephanie Noblin correspondence back on March 18th regarding DCD. And a number of links to the YouTube videos. So Linda sent her PDF of her last night's presentation and a link to her blog. Robert Crittenden had a suggestion about the Charter Review Commission and the Citizen Grand Jury.
So is it correct, Trish, that we have all of those links to us?
Yes,
Everything that you read is linked.
yes.
And if the public goes on the Charter Review Commission site, do they?
They will see them in the adopted minutes, so the ones that I acknowledged tonight won't show up until the minutes are adopted at the next meeting.
Okay.
And they will be attached to those.
Thank you. Any questions for Trish? Okay. The executive committee report is sitting in front of you. Sue Ford, Barb Christensen, and myself met on April 17th, and there were 3 issues that we were trying to discuss. We were trying to figure out a way to make life easier. I don't think we made it. In our discussion about a centralized list about all the meetings that are taking place and where they're taking place and when they're taking place and who participates. Because oftentimes the auditor is coming back saying, well, how do I know there was a meeting at X place? I have mileage for it, but how do I know that? So we're trying to come up with some centralized way to do that. And we'll keep working on that. So one of the ideas, actually, we talked about this even after the meeting, possibly, maybe Trish, if you all the meeting reports that you get, if you just put those in a 3-ring binder, it'd be easy to just flip through and anybody to find those. Would that be an easy solution?
I can do that.
Okay, you just print out the reports, and then if the auditor comes, they just pull the 3-ring binder and they'll show them who met. Okay. All
And we
right.
did
I
have a
like that.
published 1-page calendar, and we're keeping with that deadline.
Okay. We can consider that. And then the process of moving ideas and issues to the public hearing phase. If you look at your calendar that we adopted, it says May 4 is the last time that we're going to have proposed charter changes. So basically, what we conclude, and then the next meeting, May 18th, is a creation of pros and cons statements, and then we go to public hearing. So the way we sort of interpreted that is that because the committees are still meeting, that May 4th is when we will decide on the agenda for public hearings. And I think it only makes sense to have the same rules that we have had, that you have to have at least 8 people in order to refer an issue to legal advice. I think we should have at least 8 people say, yes, this idea is worth moving to public hearing. I don't know if worth is the right word, but anyway, 8 is sufficient to move it to public hearings. So that the public hearing list of issues that we'd like the public to respond to will be those that at least 8 people on the commission agree they'd like some input on. Now that does not stop the public at public hearings from saying anything they want. They're not limited or constrained, but it just simply says that we as a commission have prioritized and those are our top concerns. But other issues can be raised. And then the issues, as we vote on them next time, it'd be sufficient just to have them as concepts. They do not have to be language specific. Change 4.20 to say blah, blah, blah. But rather, as an example, the concept, should there be more than 3 county commissioners? Or the question should there be 5 county commissioners? Or however you want to frame it. Should the DCD be returned to appointed position? Should blah, blah, blah happen? So you don't have to do the exact language that you want, because this is not a charter change. This is asking for public response to issues. And then there's been a lot of discussion around this table about maybe it doesn't work really well to continue to move along with having subcommittees based on articles. While the group, all of you have been working very diligently and meeting often and submitting good reports, once all of your information comes to the table and we vote on what are our top issues, then I would like to recommend that we consider then reframing the committees. So the committees would then be formed around issues. And part of what's happened is that there are some folks, for example, Barb at the executive committee level said, you know, there's issues I'd like to be talking about, but all the committees are full. So maybe it's time to allow for, and you can actually do it 2 ways. You could have an issue with a committee, or you could have 2 committees for an issue, and one would be the proponents and one would be the opponents. That would then discuss what their views are and create the pros and cons statements. That is up to you how you want to do it. But I do think it would behoove us to, now that all this basic homework's been done, to change our format and begin to meet focused on issues. We didn't propose any rules about how that would happen. If you want some proposed rules, we could meet again, right? And come back with some proposed rules. So if we meet on May the 4th then, the plan would be that all language, all proposed ideas that you want to send out for public hearing need to be sent out to the entire commission in time for that discussion. So that works out to, anybody got a good calendar here? We've asked Trish to send our agenda out the Wednesday before our meetings, which then means that these kind of reports need to be heard to her by at least the Tuesday.
Wednesday's the 29th.
Wednesday the 29th, you're going to send out.
Yeah.
So the only way you could change that around is to give then Trish the flexibility of sending the agenda out later. Send it out.
Please.
Send it out like on Friday. Would that work for you, Trish?
I can make it work.
Okay. So would that be
There are 5 subcommittees that are meeting on the 30th. So I suppose with the delay sending those out, that would work. But I think there's another committee meeting, is it May 8th, Connie?
No, that's too
May
late.
8th. We have one the 28th. The 28th. 28th. But I thought there was another committee meeting somewhere in there.
Well, from the very beginning, we said all the committee reports need to be in by May 4th. That was our view along when we started this process. So May 4th is the time when all of those article discussion is going to come in. You'll always have time to meet again and talk about issues, because we'll then split and have committee, people sign up on committees for issues rather than articles. So anything that's scheduled after May 4th probably needs to wait.
So what is the date that we need to have them to Trish?
Well, if we're going to allow then Trish to send out the agenda on the Friday before, then you could have your reports to her by Thursday afternoon, the 30th.
You have 5
Our
minutes.
meeting
the
is
nighttime.
the night, that night.
Yes.
We have 5 meetings that night.
Right, Friday.
Noon on Friday, is that,
Noon Friday.
is that
What
okay?
date is that?
On Friday, May 1st.
May 1st? Wow.
Noon, May 1st.
That's,
And then all of that would come out. And then on May the 4th, we will have discussions on all of that information that comes in and decide on what our priorities will be. And then after that's decided, then between that and the next meeting, our responsibility is to develop some pros and cons on those positions so that the public can have that as some background. So, okay, Nola had her hand up first.
I think there's a real issue with having 5 committees meeting the night before and having the chair of each of those committees being able to get anything put together by noon the next day. I don't think that's practical. It may fit in the calendar, but it's not.
Well, from the very beginning, we said May 4th was the meeting when we were going to decide all this. That's been on the agenda for when we first set up these committees.
Madam Chair.
Yes, ma'am.
Would it be possible if we are unable to get them to Trish by the 1st, which is, that means the night from 11 o'clock on until noon the next day to get all those reports done. Would it be possible to email them to the entire commission directly as long as there's no response at the time we get them done prior to May 4th?
Well, remember, all we're asking for is concepts and issues. We are not asking to give details as to what line and what article needs to be changed or what word needs to be changed. We are looking at concepts and issues. So I'd assume out of your committees, you could come up with concepts and issues. And then the idea about what's the pros and cons of those issues, you have another 2 weeks to do.
That's not the point. The point is that we are having committee meetings all the way to 10 o'clock on the 30th. That means that the chairs will have to go home, and from 11 o'clock to 1 o'clock, I suppose, or in the morning, and some of us work, have those reports into Trish by noon. That's really tight. So my only suggestion would be to allow us, if we can't make that deadline, to just either email the entire commission with no response, so we don't not comply with the Open Meetings Act, or bring them to the May 4th meeting. I think preferably would be to email them out if we can't.
Preferably
that
would be
date.
to email them.
Yeah.
Is there
That
some
really
reason-
only
I just
gives
want
you
to
a
make
couple more
that
hours.
an option, because, if we've got a deadline of noon, and then somebody gets it in late, I don't want to see a situation where, well, it's an hour late or 2 hours late, so therefore it's not going to be addressed by the commission on May 4th, and it's dead in the water. I don't want to have that happen. So,
And the reason why it's a problem is because on at least 3 of those committees, the same person is the chair, and trying to put together information on 3 committees by noon the next day is just, I don't see how it can happen.
Well, again, I would just, whatever then, if that's what you need to do, to email it out. But again, remember, we are not asking for details. We're not
Right,
asking
but
for
it's just the
language.
volume.
We're asking for concepts. What issue do you want to have addressed? And I would hope maybe in your meeting, you could just frame that as a broad issue. And then don't worry about the pros and cons and background, because you have 2 more weeks you can do that. So.
I would ask that you email it to me and not email it to the whole commission. And I will send it, I will distribute it.
Okay, because then at least she has the records of.
Even if it's over the weekend?
It's a weekend.
No, it has to be done by Friday at 5.
Friday was
That's an issue.
good, Saturday and Sunday is the Sabbath.
So if it's a Saturday or Sunday, then there's still the possibility.
Trish is asking that you're, because it keeps the record central. Because then we know that we have everything that we're going to discuss in the fourth has gone through the central thing.
So if you just CC her, she'll have it.
Yeah, but you might change it between them and there, or give somebody else something. That way she disseminates that everybody gets the same.
Well,
And I would like us just to be a little businesslike and do this on a Monday through Friday. I mean, people have other lives on weekends, and I don't know that we need to be obligated to that. So like I say, I think if you just will work on having your concepts be pretty broad, and don't worry about the details, it's probably doable.
it still takes time to type up a report.
Well, we don't need the whole report. You could just send the list of article, blah, 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 wants to address this. Just list the 3 issues.
So what you're looking for is a title.
Oh, we're just looking for concepts and issues. That's what the public's gonna respond to. I mean,
You're gonna, yeah, it's gonna be
And
like a DCD or whatever.
yeah, and the details are gonna come later on in this agenda, in this discussion. So, does that make sense?
Makes sense to me.
Okay, so let me recoup then. That what everyone needs to have things into Trish by noon on Friday, May 1st.
I thought you said
And,
Friday.
and if there's some dire circumstance, you can't get it in by noon, then you have until 5 p.m. or 4:30, when do you leave, Trish? All right, 4:30 on Friday, you can email her and she will then send that out as an addendum. No, Friday. We're working Monday through Friday. Okay. Other questions?
Oh, yeah.
Yes, sir.
So this conversion to the new committee structure will occur after May 4th? then?
Yes,
Okay.
yes. That's why any committees that have scheduled meetings after May 4th, really, it's a non-starter because we will be creating committees based on issues.
Do you need a motion to do that?
I would appreciate one.
Okay, we'll be shifting, the motion is that we will shift to an issue-oriented committee structure on May 4th.
Okay. Been moved by Glenn. Is there a second?
Second.
Who seconded?
Celinda.
Celinda seconded. Any discussion? Those in favor? And opposed? Thank you. The last piece on here is there has been some discussion about having a questionnaire, which really enhances public input at the public hearing process. Not everyone is comfortable standing up and speaking in public. So I went back through my old files and actually found some questionnaires dating back to 1989, etc. And so we looked at those, and what I say here is that one year, and you've heard this before, that we did go to PUD and the city of Port Angeles, and they allowed us to put a one-page questionnaire into all the utility bills, so it went to everybody in Clallam County that has a plug-in in their house. But unfortunately, they have changed the policy since then, and I talked to PUD and the city sound more open to it than PUD did. So I don't think that's going to move forward. So as an alternative, I went down and talked to the Peninsula Daily News marketing guy. And they are very favorably inclined. They would be willing to put a one-page, two-sided questionnaire. It would go into the PDN, Squim Gazette, and the Forks Forum. It'd be 26,000 questionnaires that people could fill out, send back to us. Last time we did this, we had 2,400 responses. So it kind of gives you a nice sense of that at least. And it's an education tool, so you can explain what the charter is. And also, we'd want to include it in the paper early enough that it would tell people when and where the public hearings are. And then, we could even look at listing the issues that are going to be discussed at the public hearing. Well, that's what the questionnaire would be. It'd be whatever issues we're going to have at the public hearing, then people would be able to check this, that, or the other. And then they mail it back in. Yes, sir, ma'am.
I'd like to add the protocol to that list.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, and Ken, and then Maggie.
So we sent a questionnaire out, inserted into newspapers. We get a whole bunch back, hopefully. How do we know we're getting fair representation from across the county and not a special interest group dominating or somehow trying to control the response? And whether we can or not, how do we deal with, say we got 5,000 back, who's gonna data sort that? How are we gonna validate it? And how are we gonna know what it means?
Well, I would say it's not gonna be a scientific. You're not gonna be able to validate. I mean, people will put down that they can sign their name, but they don't have to. I would be shocked if we got 5,000 if we did. The compiling,
We should celebrate.
we would try and figure that out. I thought we could talk to like the high school kids that are taking, what is it?
Senior.
Senior, yeah, you know what I'm talking about. Current events. You know, if you took them up there and had each kid in the class do. We could work out how to, and actually there's some other ideas I was gonna talk to Shuna about. Is there some way to run it through a machine that we could program it?
Well, I guess the second half of my question is more important to me. What are we gonna do with these? What are they gonna mean to us?
It will just give you some general idea of what's out there. It just gives more people a chance to participate. And it's probably no more scientific than our public hearings are, where it's just people that have the time and the energy to come. That's the people we hear from. So I don't think it's any different, but, so you're not gonna be able to validate it. It's not gonna be statistically valid, but it gives you a sense, and at least it's an opportunity for
It's a weather
people who
report.
live wherever.
The weather report.
Yeah,
We know how reliable those are.
yeah. So,
That was my
Meg.
question. My question was gonna be, how are we gonna validate the information?
well, how do we validate anything? We take public
Like,
input and then
who's gonna be willing to sit down and review all of these and tally it up? Because you sure can't put any more on the
I am
plate.
not, Trish will not have any responsibility in that. And I will promise I'll find somebody who can do that. It's actually kind of fun. And we will, the executive committee is willing to try and work on designing this questionnaire. So, Laura,
Well, I was thinking maybe if we were worried about making it even or equal out in the community, perhaps maybe we could do like on the radio, K1P, and then put it on the county's website under the charter review, or an opportunity to fill out the survey or whatever the questionnaire, whatever you called it as well.
Download it.
So
Download the form?
Then you have duplications, possibly.
What about doing something like the newspaper does online, where they have the little questions that you can click this box for this or whatever?
Do you know how reliable that is?
No, I would say no, because I'm sure that you can answer it 4 or 5 times a day if you wanted to.
Exactly. They have no screen to keep people from voting.
You could link it to SurveyMonkey.
That's what I was gonna
You could link it to
say.
SurveyMonkey and only one person can do it, and
That's right.
and you can't duplicate it.
Right.
And it can stat it out for you then,
That's right.
and you don't have to process it. And you just, and SurveyMonkey, for as simple as this one would be free. And you would just put the link on there, and
Just
then
put the
people get.
announcements in the newspaper and have them go to survey,
That's
then
what
it's
it
told
should do,
for
then
us.
there's no brainer to it.
Right.
The documentation is.
It's only one
telling us-
person.
Exactly.
Okay. So this is all for discussion, so I'm taking all these ideas in, Noah.
I guess my question is, when we have the public hearing, my presumption was that any issue that was brought to us at that point, we'll move forward with that, or at least we would give them a reason why we're not. There's no way we can do that with 5,000 or however many come back from this. So I'm assuming that would be a different approach than the public hearing approach.
These are augmenting the public hearings.
But we
So
don't
they
have to
will come
respond.
in, we will not respond to these questionnaires.
Thank you.
But they will come in, it just gives us a broader sense of what the community wants.
And lets them vent.
Huh?
And lets them vent.
Well, hopefully, and learn what we're up to and what we're about. So I guess what I would conclude this discussion, so it doesn't take too long, is are you interested in having the executive committee pursue this possibility? And we can look at that idea of
Survey.
doing a survey monkey.
I think that's a great idea.
I think it's a waste of time, but it's okay. I think it's a lot of work for results that, you know,
If
I mean, what are you
intelligent-
gonna do with it? I mean, how are you gonna sort it? How are you gonna analyze it? I mean,
What do you do with public comment when people come and talk to you?
well,
You
it's,
listen to it, you
you
write it
sort
down.
it as it occurs. I
Yeah.
mean,
Anyway, so I'm gonna, a couple more comments and then let's wind this up because we have other issues.
So the priority of somebody filling out a questionnaire and sending it in to be a part of the public hearing, don't want to stand up and talk about it, that would be treated exactly as somebody coming to a public hearing. Is that right? Or not?
I don't think so.
So it's just, like you say, it's a weather report.
Well,
It
actually,
doesn't really, that just, the function of this questionnaire is to get those who don't want to choose to speak in public, is that right?
well, it's twofold. Number one, education about what is the charter, what are we doing, what are the issues we're discussing,
And it's publicizing the public hearing.
and publicizing the public hearing. The other thing is that traditionally, we've always had a questionnaire available at the public hearings. So people who come and they don't want to testify, but they have definite ideas on the issues, fill it out and leave it at the end of the, and that can be treated as the same as anybody who speaks,
Okay, that's clear.
because they hand it in.
Sure.
All right, so all I'm looking for from this commission is, would you like us to go back and have the executive committee talk about this some more and try and figure out, make something happen? That's all I'm looking for.
Sure.
All right, is that sure, a couple sures of those consensus, or do you want?
I think it's a good idea.
All right, thanks. We'll go back then and do it. I think we've given ourselves enough time to get back to the minutes. Rod, did your minutes download?
Minutes are downloaded, and I'm fine with them. I read through them, I don't see any big issue.
Thank you. Okay, everybody else, I assume, has had a chance to work through them. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes as submitted?
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Rod, seconded by Maggie. Any discussion? Hearing none, those in favor? Aye. And opposed? Okay.
I'm abstaining, I was not present.
Okay, so Linda and Barb both abstained because they were not present. Okay. So now, we're at the public comments. So we have a sign-up list. See, Ron, could you bring me the sign-up list, please?
Sure.
And remembering that it is a 3-minute time frame. Welcome, we're all glad you came. Thank you. So the first name I have is Linda Benson.
Hi, I'm Linda Benson. I'm speaking for myself and my husband, John Benson. We live at 22 Morningstar Way in Clallam, actually Lynn County. We respectfully submit the following comments for consideration by the Commission. The position of Director of Community Development should be brought into line with other county directors and should not be an elected position. There should be 5 county commissioners, 1 each from the 3 districts and 2 at large. This will lessen the concentration of power and give more voice to the electorate. We have elected officials who are entrusted by the people to manage county business and in some cases determine taxes. Requiring a vote by the people on any tax increase is an expensive, burdensome process that can stop progress. The people will have a voice during the next election cycle to re-elect or fire any official that does not do what they promised in their election campaign. We need to trust whomever we have placed in charge. Requiring a 60% majority instead of a simple majority in elections empowers a small group of people to dictate outcomes. This was painfully demonstrated in the last election. 57.6%, the majority of the people, were in favor of the swim school bond, and it failed. The 60% rule prevented a majority rule, which is the foundation of our democracy. The reason counties don't have control of all natural resources is to prevent local politics from determining how the environment is protected. This is a good plan because we are a part of the state, the county, and the ecosystem of the entire world. The Office of the Prosecuting Attorney should be nonpartisan. Thanks to all of the members of the Commission, you are participating in a vital public service.
Thank you. And the next is Bill Wilson.
Thank you and good evening, ladies and gentlemen of the Commission. Tonight I rise to urge you to support a new article for the county charter, the inauguration of a fully independent citizens grand jury, the type described in the Fifth Amendment of the Constitution. Why, you may ask? I'll answer that by asking a few questions, and these are all questions that have come across my desk in the last year and a half at the Port of Call. Should public officials profit financially from their jobs other than their regular paycheck? Should the city be paying out over $500,000 a year in jail costs when most of those incarcerated are eligible under District Court Rule 3.2 to be released on their own recognizance? Should female defendants at District Court be caused to sing Itsy Bitsy Spider in exchange for having 2 of their 3 traffic charges dismissed? Should anyone suffer being intimidated and bullied at District Court? Should those who are incarcerated be caused to pay up to $5 a minute for phone calls to keep the home fires burning while they are in jail? Should their families be stuck with these obscene phone bills because they're usually made to collect calls? Should a contractor who contracts with the city to replace old pipes but instead merely paints the pipes that are in the ground and pass them off as new, should they be put on trial for fraud? Should a sitting city council person be voting on issues that benefit their day job employer? Should a sitting mayor sign contracts benefiting her day job employer? Should a sitting mayor sign multi-million-dollar contracts benefiting her day job employer? Should there be an independent body looking into the existence of nearly $100,000 in questionable checks written to someone at the Chamber of Commerce, we don't know who? This is over and above the lodging tax. Should there be an independent body investigating charges that the county employees are dumping toxic waste into its estuaries around the county? Should an independent body investigate reports that county employees are using county labor and county heavy equipment to improve private property? Should an independent body investigate why we have a $15 million gateway transit center that arguably is worth about half that? Should an independent body investigate why the city paid $1 million for a lot downtown known to be a worthless toxic dump site? Should an independent body investigate the reasons the business incubator project blows through $8 million in taxpayer money with nothing to show for it, and then hangs the taxpayers with a $750,000 bill when they finally turn out the lights? Should somebody investigate how that bill for $750,000 got placed on the taxpayers? Should there be an independent body investigating when local businesses stiffs the city for $250,000 in unpaid utility bills to be sure there's not a form of gifting going on? When a state trooper chases a motorcyclist to his death out on the Deer Park Road, shouldn't there be an independent body investigating that instead of their own agency? These are some of the issues that could and should and would be investigated if we had a fully independent, non-political grand jury. An independent grand jury is independent of the political climate. It is separate from the county prosecutor's office and is independent from the judiciary, both political and in nature, and rightly so. In a small community like ours, no one likes to second-guess the decision-making of another political entity. Yet we must. And all too often, decisions are made by the good old boys in the back rooms where the public is not present. When spending taxpayer money, there must be accountability. There must be checks and balances that are not subject to the whim of political winds.
Okay, can you wrap up for us, Dale, because your 3 minutes is up. So
All right.
Get to your conclusion.
Thank you.
Did you have a concluding sentence you wanted to make?
Yes. Imagine for a moment that there was real accountability in decision-making throughout the county, that it was an independent grand jury that can bring to the community And I urge you to vote unanimously to put this on the ballot and let the citizens decide if they want real fundamental accountability throughout all areas. Some of you are asking how this is paid for. If we had a grand jury in process back when there was money disappearing from some of the county offices, with a really secret grand jury in process, somebody probably would have come and said, there's money missing, and we would have saved those $500,000 or $600,000 that got lost because we had a secret grand jury that could hear those complaints without a person feeling their job was at risk if they tried to do the right thing and report it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And next is Alan Anderson.
I feel like an addendum to what Dale said. My name is Alan Anderson. I live at 324 North Lease Creek Road, and I'm also going to speak briefly on the grand jury. In case you haven't noticed it yet, like Dale says, there's something missing in America, all the way from the federal level to the municipal level. It's called accountability. So what does it look like when accountability is missing? Let's, for the sake of expediency, consider just one particular incident that I'm sure you're all familiar with. State Patrol Trooper Travis Beebe. In May of 2012, Trooper Beebe was involved in a high-speed pursuit of Bjorn Larson up Deer Park Road. According to eyewitnesses, Trooper Beebe's car was less than a car length behind Larson's motorcycle at speeds up to 60 miles per hour just seconds before Larson's motorcycle missed a curve and plunged over an embankment with Beebe's car right behind. Bjorn Larson died. Just 7 months after this incident, Trooper Beebe was responsible for a 3-car accident on Highway 101 near Morse Creek. He performed a U-turn in the middle of the road during rush hour traffic on the busiest shopping day of the year, better known as Black Friday. He accelerated, lost control of his car, and plowed into 2 other vehicles head-on. Fortunately, none of the 9 victims of the accident were injured. My question: what was he doing back on the road in the first place? There was still an investigation going on. Now, even if his actions in the first case were not sufficient to consider suspension, much less an indictment, his actions in the second one, on top of his actions in the first, with so little time in between, should be ground for some kind of legal action outside the purview of the agency responsible for his being on the road in the first place. Is there a mechanism in place at this time that should already be involved? Should Trooper Beebe have been brought up on charges? Should he have been indicted? I believe this is where the independent community grand jury might get involved. I believe it could provide the accountability that the situation demands. And although I'm sure there are jurisdictional considerations here, the way our statutes are currently written and our courts are set up, maybe this is an appropriate time to consider what it says in one of our nation's greatest documents, the Declaration of Independence. We hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. That whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or to abolish it and institute new government. Now, I'm not here to advocate abolishing our government, but to suggest we consider a better path to dispensing and ensuring that justice be served. And I believe that can be accomplished when you get the community involved through an independent community grand jury. With the community involved, the buck stops here, and it provides the accountability we've all been looking for. Thank you.
Thank you. And next is Judy Hangartner.
Good evening. My name is Judy Hangartner. I live at 1815 East 4th Street. I'm a member of the Justice Restoration Group. We, the people, have neglected the grand jury to the point that now it has lost its independence from the government and lies assimilated by and compliant to the judicial branches of the government. The grand jury that most people see today is counterfeit and of the true original common law. And it is based on, it is based on the true original common law. Thus, the need arises to distinguish the real one from the counterfeit one that we see today. Many government whistleblowers are now afraid to come forward because there is no independent institution separate from the government that will protect them from rogue agents who have infiltrated the government from within. As a result, both the government and the people suffer needlessly due to we, the people, not doing our job of providing the energy for that oversight through a strong, vibrant, and independent grand jury, or otherwise referred to the community grand jury. Moreover, we, the people, do dedicate ourselves to awaken more in bringing back to our county this independent grand jury and re-energize it to help restore integrity, government, and faith and trust in same, in order to ensure a more perfect coming together for our children and our future generations, one liberty with justice for all. Thank you.
Next is Linda Crane.
Good evening. Thank you for your service, Commissioner. I really appreciate the work that you do. I'm just adding to what Judy and Alan and Gail have said. I'm in complete agreement with them. I would like to encourage you to unanimously approve and include an independent community grand jury as part of our county charter. Governments are instruments that we, the people, create in order to secure the blessings of our liberty. We, the people, have the responsibility of overseeing the government, including the judiciary, in order for justice to prevail. Our county charter should clearly reflect this, just as the Constitution for the United States and Washington's own RCW 42, Section 56, both affirm. Clearly, the government cannot be in charge of deciding for themselves whether they should indict themselves on criminal charges. In case any of you are still on the fence about this, I would like to share a statement from Lysander Spooner. He was the author of Trial by Jury in 1852. Any government that is its own judge of and determines authoritatively for the people what its own powers are over the people is an absolute government, of course. It has all the powers that it chooses to exercise. There is no other, or at least no more accurate, definition of despotism than this. Thank you.
Thank you. And next is Ed Bowen.
Good evening, Commissioners. Ed Bowen, P.O. Box 101, Clallam Bay. A little bit of pollen allergy today, so deeper voice. My comment today is a process comment to you as the board, as the commission. At the last meeting, your subcommittee reports, some of them made it onto the website along with the agenda. I thought this was a good tool because it kind of gave me some insight what you would be talking about at the meeting. Unfortunately, that didn't happen this time, so tonight I'm showing up in the blind. I'm going to try to figure out what your committee reports are going to be about. Along with that, though, I learned sitting here before you different viewpoints of the commission, and it's pretty valuable for me to understand this so that I know how you come up with your votes and all as you move forward here. And so I'm going to ask the commission tonight to keep a good record of who attends these subcommittee meetings, either in the current form or the new form that it was submitted tonight under motion. Thank you.
Thank you. And Paula Barnes.
Good evening. My name is Paula Barnes. I live at 783 Lost Mountain Lane. My husband and I have been residents of Clallam County for 9 years. I understand some members of the public have encouraged you to stiffen the requirements for county tax measures, and I'm here tonight to speak against two of these recommendations. The first bad idea that has apparently come before you is that there should be a vote of the people regarding any new county taxes. This is seems to me to be clearly an effort by some to slow our local government to a crawl. In fact, they probably prefer to paralyze it. We elect the county commissioners with the expectation that they will be fully educated about the county's financial status, its revenue projection in near-term and long-term fiscal obligations, and that they'll act in the best interest of the county with that information in mind. That's their job and we pay them for it. We can't possibly expect the electorate to be as well informed. And it's unreasonable to expect the county staff to undertake a massive and ongoing education effort to keep the voters educated and informed. And elections aren't cheap. They can cost $15,000 to $30,000 depending on how many items are on the ballot. And that's not the cost of a campaign for or against something. That's just the cost of running an election. The second bad idea is requiring a 60% majority for all county tax measures. We've seen the tragic effects of the 60% majority in the recent SQUIM school bond election. More than 57% of the votes were cast in favor of the measure, but it failed anyway. A 60% requirement truly represents the tyranny of the minority. Someone who is against a tax issue has a vote that is essentially weighted, such that it's worth 1.5 times the vote of someone who supports the issue. The vote of someone who supports a tax issue is only worth 2/3 of someone who's against it. Where's the fairness in that? And I might point out that nowadays in the US Senate, it seems a 60% majority is required to do just about anything, and we've all seen how well that's working out. So let's not introduce a similar level of dysfunction into our local county government. We have a representative form of government, not a pure democracy. This means we put governmental responsibility and power in the hands of our elected officials, and we hold them accountable for their actions. Shifting power to the electorate, which lately has been less than 40% of all registered voters, in this case makes no sense, so please reject these two bad ideas. Thank you for listening, and I've given copies of my remarks to Trish.
Yep. And next is Brian Boone. Brian, if you get up, if you could give me your address, please.
252 Lavender Ridge Lane.
52.
Glen, Washington. 252 Lavender Ridge Lane.
Okay.
That's Maureen is the last name.
All right.
I believe that if we had a county, if we had a county grand jury, the issue that we have going on in the county recorder's office wouldn't be an issue. What we have a crime scene in our county recorder right now. 80% of all the mortgages in this county are invalid or fraudulent. 80%. I don't know if anybody's seen the John O'Brien report I sent to Trish several weeks ago. Evidently nobody's read it. I'll be sending more information. What we have here is we have a major problem. All of you guys have had property or do have property, or so if you do have mortgages, I guarantee you, if you start digging into your mortgage, you're going to find major problems. Not only that, if you bought any property in this county, or the country as far as that goes, in the last 10, 15 years, 80% of those could have a broken chain of title. I think it's a major issue that we all need to be consciously aware of. These banks have been controlling all of you for years. They are nothing but a cartel of international bankers. We need to draw a line right here. Just about every entity in the United States right now is suing these banks. Bank of America has billions of dollars set aside just for these lawsuits. They're waiting to happen. We've got the Department of Justice all the way down to our state. Attorney General's office has sued these banks. All this money was invested supposedly in mortgage-backed securities, or thrown into mortgage-backed securities. So a lot of your retirement funds are there. So when this all gets undone winding, we're going to have some more problems there. The biggest dream that America has is to own a house. When Bank of America comes in and forecloses on a 76-year-old lady in this county who didn't even have a mortgage with Bank of America, we got it wrong. We've got homes rented all over this county right now. And other people are going and buying them. This county has got $6 million loss of revenue because of this. Just on the face. I'm sure if I dig deeper, I'll find more. The Sheriff's Department has known about this for 2 years. They're still assisting in these foreclosures. Tell me somebody did something, don't you think? Hope you guys do something. Somebody once told me, once knowledgeable, now accountable. Handle yourself accordingly. Thank you.
Is there anyone who failed to sign up but would like to speak? Okay, thank you. The next thing is financial report from Bob Christensen. This is a financial report on the charter's budget.
At the end of March, we have spent $1,247, which leaves us remaining funds of $3,853.
Any questions for Bob? Now the next is the subcommittee reports. It's okay, we'll just start with one, move on through. And I'll read the names of the members of each article. So is Article 1 ready to report? Yes. Okay. So Sue is the contact person, also includes Nola Judd, Ted Miller, Maggie Ruff, Connie Bouvet, and Rod Fleck.
Okay, the meeting took place at the Bella Rosa Coffee House at 5 p.m. on April 7th. As Norma mentioned, myself, Ted Miller, Maggie Roth, Connie Bouvet, and Rod Fleck were present, and Nola was excused. The committee unanimously agreed to call for an action item and move the following forward to the commission for consideration at the public hearings in response to testimony given to the citizens. Should the charter be amended to substitute section 120, intergovernmental relations, as currently written with the following: the county and its officials should, may, will exercise their powers within this charter and applicable laws in such a manner as to ensure a coordinated response with state and federal agencies on those issues that impact the citizens, the economy, and or land in Clallam County. Those reports are coming around, by the way, with members. The committee unanimously agreed to move to the commission a request for an opinion from Mark Nichols as to whether the following would address his concern about section 130 by changing that section to read: the powers of the county shall be limited to those specifically granted in this charter. To delete the rest of the first sentence, the remainder of the section to be unchanged. The committee unanimously agreed to call for an action item and move the following forward to the commission for consideration at the public hearings in response to testimony given by citizens. Should the charter be amended to add a new section to Article 1 as follows: the right of privacy in one's personal affairs is essential to the ideals of liberty, and as such, the county and its officials will ensure that such a right is recognized and protected as established by the state and U.S. constitutions. There being no further business, we adjourned at 6 p.m.
Any questions of Sue? Any other members of that committee want to make a comment? Then we'll move on to Article 2. Steve Burke, you're the contact person, and that Article 2 includes also Sue Ford, Maggie Ross, Linda Barkhouse, Glenn Wiggins, Barbara Christensen, and Rod Fleck. So Steve, are you getting that?
Yes.
Report? Do you have is there a handout that we have
Yes.
somewhere on our desk?
It should be on the desk already. We're Article 2, and we met on Tuesday, April 7th at 4 p.m. at Bella Rosa. Those present were myself, Sue Ford, Maggie Roth, Rod Fleck, Barbara Christensen, Linda Barkhouse was excused. Oh, Barbara was too.
Thank you.
And we decided to prepare wording for the County Board of Commissioners related to the salary commission, that issue didn't rise to the of having to forward it on for hearing or for a vote. And so we'll be preparing that language to send to them. And we discussed term limits, that there was no action taken. We discussed videotaping of county commission meetings, and we decided that would also be forwarded to the county commissioners for a possible action. We did agree on some things that we wanted to forward to public hearings for consideration. The first one would be in terms of, shall the charter be amended to provide for election of county commissioners within the commissioner district from which the candidate is nominated? And that essentially covers the issue of that you would be elected in the district that you're representing. And there's a couple other ones that are similar to that. The other one was registered voters of each county commissioner district shall vote upon each county commissioner position to be filled from their district at the November general election. Candidates receiving the highest number of votes for each position shall be elected to 4-year terms. And that has to do with the wording in section 220. Rod Fleck did give us an update on Senate Bill HB 1745. It's a Voters' Right Act, and that is moving its way through the House and the Senate about where it might end up forcing counties like us to go to district vote representation anyways. Rod probably could, do you want to give a little blurb on that?
I didn't get a chance, I was a little distracted over the last week to look up where the Voter Rights Act bill is, but what it does is it creates a legal cause of action for underrepresented classes of underrepresented individuals to challenge an election where you do one part by district and the other part by the whole area associated with that jurisdiction. And it would affect cities, counties, etc. And the remedy that is offered to correct that is to go to a district-based election system. There's some challenges to that as well, but that was the version I'd seen. I've not looked at it in 2 weeks. It had cleared the House, had gone into the Senate with a UPass Senate committee recommendation and a minority report, and I've not seen it since in the last week. I've not looked. But I do think it's one that would be worth asking legal counsel to just take a gander at and see if they have any concerns about that bill and the way it's worded, as well as the Yakima case which it's based upon, and the way we are doing elections.
All right, thanks, Rod. We also had another item that we wanted to bring up for consideration for public hearings, and it has a couple different nuances, but essentially it is whether we should provide for the election of 5 county commissioners, and those would be changed to part-time, and they would not be executive but only legislative county commissioners. And along with that is whether at that point you wanted to do an election of a county administrator that would then be in charge of the executive portion of this process. And so because there's a couple different things, it could, in the flush out, it could look a little bit different, where you could have 5, it might end up being 5 full-time that keep executive and legislative and be part-time, or you could have 5 with an elected administrator, you could have 5 with not an elected administrator. And so there's a couple varieties that could shape out to look like. And that was all that we gave.
I'll have a page attached to mine, to the charter.
That shouldn't be attached.
Huh?
That shouldn't be there.
That shouldn't be attached.
So we ended at 4:55.
Anybody else on that committee have a comment they want to make about the report?
I want to make a comment. I was excused as is indicated, but the only comment I want to make about the videotaping commission meetings, and I guess this is my minority report, is that I do think that at the charter level we should consider requiring that, and that will be one of my suggestions that I will make. For instance, when I go to look at the page where the videotapes are, the video recordings are, I see that many dozens of people are looking at these videos. And I can assure you that I seriously doubt that Trish has ever had dozens and dozens of requests for an MP3. I mean, this is, if you want to know what actually happens at a Board of County Commissioners meeting now, you have to email Trish and request the MP3. And you get this MP3, and you have to listen to it. You have no idea who's talking unless you recognize the voices. And I had a portion of this MP3 transcribed by a very experienced court reporter. She did 10 minutes for me, but refused to do any more because the MP3 is of such poor quality. They're useless. It's a black box. The minutes of the commissioners are very limited as well. So I think the videos of these meetings are very valuable, and there's such a contrast between the accessibility of looking at a video versus having to go through all of that to listen to a tape, just a recording, voice recording. The voice recordings, people don't listen to voice recordings of people talking. They have no idea who's talking, who's saying what. They can't. It's boring. It's excruciating to listen to. And I've listened to my share of MP3s, voice recordings of commissioner meetings, and I can tell you it's excruciating. And to tell people, okay, if you want to hear this, you have to go and get this recording from Trish. And I don't like telling people to go. Dozens of people go and vote Trish for recordings, but then you have to. People don't do that. But the video, they will. The video, if you can say it's here on the website, look at minute 12 of this, people will look at it. That's accountability.
So what Linda raises to remind all of you that we've always said that committees can come up with recommendations, but individual commissioners also have the ability to come before us on May 4th with a particular. If you can get 8 votes to move it to the public hearing, then it'll move. So we can bring that, send that to Trish as before the next meeting. Okay, Article 4, Ted Miller, and the other members of that is Noah Judd, Ken Hayes, Ron Bell, and Norma Turner.
Okay. Committee 4A met initially on the 25th of March, and the second meeting was held on the 7th of April to include absent members from the March meetings. I believe technically Norma Turner is the only one to attend both meetings. So I compiled the results of the 2 meetings into a single report. The membership voted to return the DCD position to an appointed one by a 4-to-1 margin with Judd dissenting. Nola Judd and myself felt that retaining it as an elected position would be acceptable if qualifications could be added. I want to give Nola Judd an opportunity to speak at the end, but I believe she also felt that it would be preferable to retain it as an elected position without qualifications if that was necessary. But no consensus on acceptable qualifications was reached. And of course, if it wasn't replaced or changed to an appointed position, it would not be effective until the completion of the current elected term. The majority advanced 7 different reasons for this. I submitted the reports. I didn't plan to read them out, so you can look at them yourself. In addition, the committee elected not to consider the issue of having a nonpartisan prosecuting attorney pending an attorney general opinion on the matter.
Anybody else in that committee want to make a comment? Thank you. The other Article 4, Subcommittee B, is headed by Steve Burke and includes Linda Courthouse, Glenn Wiggins, Connie Bouvet, and Don Corson.
And we did not submit any minutes because we have not met since the last meeting, but we'll be meeting before that May 4th, and we'll be getting that submitted Probably look a lot like 4As.
Okay, all right, thank you. Article 6, Subcommittee A, and
I thought I was going to be given an opportunity.
I asked if any member, sorry, maybe you didn't hear me.
I thought you wanted to hear both groups before you.
No, I said, did any other member of that committee want to speak before we move on? I guess you probably just didn't hear me.
I don't think that any of us had any disagreement on the need for qualifications. My feeling was that qualifications can be spelled out so that when it comes to an election, the electorate knows what the minimum requirements are, and a person wouldn't apply unless they had them. One of the things I was concerned about was the third item, that they seemed to indicate that only one, because we were the only one in the nation that has that is for some reason necessarily bad. I don't necessarily agree with that. That could mean that we're progressive and that we're thinking out of the box. Doesn't necessarily mean it's bad. The other thing too they brought out was that it might be seen as outside the norm of county systems. And I sincerely doubt that. At this point, I think that is purely conjecture, and I can be just as conjecturing on the opposite point of view. The fourth item, I felt like it was keeping it as it is, provides the continuity and consistency, just the same as what they were talking about. I don't understand the comment. Either way, you would have that consistency. But it also can promote cronyism, which is something that I think we all are aware can be a problem. I think the main thing that we all agreed on was there needs to be qualified leadership and critical knowledge. However, that is to be obtained in either approach. One of the things that I felt like by doing this, by having it go to the appointed rather than staying as it is elected, was that we're sending the message that we don't trust the electorate. And this has come up. This isn't the first time this come to the community. It's been turned down, I think, twice on prior occasions, and I think that we should think about that carefully. And the fact that we did have some issues with one of our DCD directors, I think it's important to remember that once does not a pattern make.
Okay, thank you. So, we did 4B, okay, so Article 6, 5, the work is completed and it's not reporting. We met and
no recommendations.
There are no recommendations, and that's what we reported last time we met. So that one, the work is completed. Article 6, Subcommittee A, is Norma Turner, Ken Hayes, and Ron Bell. We met on April 7th. We discussed concerns about the role of elected officials other than commissioners. And just for general discussion, thought it'd be interesting to have a conversation about how does their job differ from department heads regarding responsibilities, who they report to, and do they have any control over their budgets. If there's very little difference between appointed department heads and elected officials, then why do we have elected officials? So it's just a question. Spinning off of that, we are recommending that the charter define the county. And as used in the charter, it should be all elected officials that are under the home rule charter should be involved in implementing whatever happens in, or be involved in decision-making somehow. Article 6, Administrator, we have some suggested language. The administrator shall be directly responsible to the elected county officials, Board of County Commissioners, and other elected officials, and shall serve the county by making professional recommendations concerning the operation of general affairs of the county. The administrator shall coordinate review and preparation of the annual budget with all elected officials and appointed department heads, and prepare the proposed annual budget be presented to the Board of County Commissioners and other elected officials for final approval. The administrator shall be responsible for hiring and dismissing county employees, supervising county employees under his direct authority through the appointed department heads, delegating authority in these areas where appropriate and as prescribed by this charter or by ordinance. And then we had some proponent views as to why that language difference was proposed. And if that language was adopted, it required minor revisions in Article 2.3.20 and in 9.3. We had a general discussion about the roles and responsibility of commissioners versus administrator. And we believe the administrator, even though appointed by the commissioners, should be responsible to all elected officials. The administrator should prepare the budget, and commissioners and elected officials should have equal standing in review of the budget. Commissioners need to approve the final budget. 6.20, clarifying language should be inserted to note the administrator serves the commission rather than the commissioners. The difference in that language means the administrator acts only when a majority of the commissioners make a request for action. The administrator also serves the other elected officials. And then a question was, does the administrator currently have enough authority to serve as defined above? We oppose changing the administrator to an elected executive. That was a unanimous decision. Ken and Ron are the other two members. Do you have any comment about the report?
No, I don't.
Okay. All right. Then the other Article 6, Subcommittee B, is headed by Glenn Wiggins and includes Maggie Ross, Steve Burke, Selena Barkhouse, Noah Judd, and Sue Ford.
And I stepped down from that.
You did. Okay, I'll scratch you off there then.
Is there a report?
Okay.
There's no written report. We have, we did meet and discuss the idea of looking at all the other charter counties to see how they dealt with the administrator. And I haven't had reports back from those folks relative to that. I am asking that after this meeting, that those names just mentioned meet together to have a meeting date set so that we can get that response of that study before all of you. But we don't have it tonight. Okay?
Thank you. Anybody else in that committee have a comment? Article 7 is headed by Rod Fleck and includes Ron Bell, Ted Miller, and Don Corson. So Rod, are you giving that report?
We have not met yet, mainly because my schedule hasn't allowed me to get in there. I am hopeful to send a note out to the 3 others and ask what might work for them next week. Otherwise, we may be doing this by email or phone.
Any comments from any other members of Article 7? Article 8, headed by Connie Bouvet and includes Sue Ford, Ted Miller, Maggie Roth, Steve Burke, and Mike Doherty.
The Article 8 subcommittee met on April 7th, beginning at 7 p.m. at Bella Rosa.
Before you start, what, you have a handout?
Yes.
Let me find it. Okay, 1, 8, found it. Thank you, Connie. Okay. Does everybody have the Article 8 meeting report? Okay. Thanks. Excuse me, Connie.
The Article 8 subcommittee met on April 7th, beginning at 7 p.m. at Bella Rosa in Port Angeles. In attendance were Steve Burke, Ted Miller, Sue Ford, Maggie Roth, Mike Doherty, and Connie Beauvais. Regarding sections 810 through 830, that is the initiative and referendum general provisions, the initiative general provisions, and initiative limitations, it was reported that after reviewing the other charters in the state, it appears our language is different and that initiatives go through the county commissioners before going to a vote of the people. Following discussion, it was agreed to suggest changing the language of the first paragraph of 810 as follows. The initiative and referendum process shall begin by the presentation of a petition to the auditor for registration. A Upon registration of a petition and approval of the ballot title, the time period for gathering of signatures shall begin. If petitions with sufficient signatures are filed within the appropriate time limit, the measures shall be placed on the ballot. Regarding Section 8.40, initiative 120 days for the filing of petitions rather than 90 days. And so that would just change that language from 90 to 120 days. This would allow more time for petitioners to obtain the necessary signatures. Regarding sections 8.50 and 8.60, that is initiative action by commissioners and referendum by the Board of County Commissioners, two of our members are going to take a look at RCW 37.01, the initiative, as it relates to the noted sections, and report at the next subcommittee meeting. Regarding sections 8.70 and 8.80, referendum by the people and submission of ordinances by the people, Sue Ford presented copies of noted sections from other charters in the state. It appears that the only difference is the number of signatures required. It was agreed that no changes should be made to the noted sections. Regarding section 8.90, recall, Ted Miller reported that this section is preempted by law. Regarding section 8.95, access to public officials, Connie Beauvais reported that no other charter in the state has language on the topic. The subcommittee recommends no changes to this section. Our next scheduled meeting for the subcommittee is April 30th at 7 p.m. at Bella Rosa in Port Angeles.
Is there anybody in that committee that wants to make a comment? Eight. Article 9 and Article 10 have Barb Christensen as the lead and Ron Bell. So the two report on both those, please.
Okay. I do not have a written report, so don't bother wasting time for either one. Ron and I met this evening at Bella Rosa at 5:30 p.m. Both Ron and I were present. We are not going to be making any recommendations to the committee, so we have concluded our Article 9 and 10. Oh, wait, no, I lied. Article 10, I lied. Article 10, sorry. Rod Fleck drafted up some language. It's cleanup based on the prosecutor attorney's request on that. And so Rod Fleck did draft up some language for us.
Ron Bell.
Rod Fleck gave us some draft language for us to propose to the committee. Sorry.
Has that been, did you ever report that shows that language?
We do not. We just met at 5:30, so I would
okay,
have
no, I'm sorry.
So I'm sorry.
That's all right. I'm sure I wasn't missing anything.
Yeah, no, 5:39.
Okay. Anybody else in that committee or?
Yeah, just so that we aren't totally uniform, but it sounds like from my hearing the other discussions, I thought section 9.90 might be a place to put the salary commission because it deals with the financial administration. But am I understanding that the county commissioners are going to be undertaking that themselves right now? So we don't need to put anything in the charter review regarding the salary commission.
Can I ask what that assumption is based, that the commissioners are going to take care of this?
I thought it was based on what I heard from Steve, isn't it?
Yeah, in Article 2, which is where it's thought that would go, it was a consensus of the people there that it wouldn't rise to a ballot measure, but since all three commissioners want to do something, that they would take this on and we would do it as a recommendation for them to do it.
I'm not sure.
Well, those things can all be, the other side of that coin can be raised at any time. Okay, Article 11, Subcommittee A. That's the B, okay. So the A report is Norma Turner, Ken Hayes, Linda Barkhouse, and Ron Bell. And this report is based on the meeting with Ken Hayes, Ron Bell, and myself. Linda was absent, so chime in here. Okay, so we timeline for the Clallam County Charter Review Commission to be moved from January 1st to December 31st, and say it must convene within the first 2 weeks of January. Because we had all that kerfluffle over the December meetings. We thought an idea worth considering, but we are not making a firm recommendation, is that we consider having a primary contest, a primary election on charter review candidates to reduce the number of candidates to the top 6 per district. The final election being 3 per district, which would be a total commission of 9. The reasons for the primary and reducing to 9 members is it would give the public more opportunities to learn about the charter. They have both the primary and the general election cycle to have that discussion. It creates greater opportunities for candidates to discuss why they're running for the position prior to the general, so voters will have more information and create some balance of voting, which now oftentimes, because of the large number of candidates, is name recognition rather than issues. C, it's an unequal number, so that's important for decision making. And since the county functions with only 1 county commissioner per district, we thought that perhaps 3 per district as a charter review was sufficient representation. So we're not making a, at this point, a solid recommendation, but it's an idea having worthy of some discussion. Under section 11.10, we'd like to add a new subsection, and that is that the Board of County Commissioners shall conduct meetings as required, including district town hall meetings, to fully vet publicly all recommendations for changes or revisions to county operations and procedures not proposed for ballot measures, forward to them by the Charter Review Commission. The meeting shall engage the public and shall encourage public comment on the proposed changes and revisions. Upon conclusion of the meetings, the Board of County Commissioners shall issue written conclusions and responses to the recommendations, including timelines for adoption of the recommendations and/or reasons for not adopting the recommendations. And this came out of our discussion earlier on that we would be sending some ideas to the commissioners for their action, and this was just had some stronger language about once we send it to them, how we would hope they would handle it. So, any other comments from either Ron or Ken, who were at the meeting? And it's Linda, you're a member of the committee but were absent, so did you get a chance to look at this? Okay.
My only question is when it just doesn't happen. How do you enforce it? That's, my question.
You mean about the county commissioners reviewing recommendations? Actually, there have been times that charter reviews have sent recommendations to the commissioners with timelines. So if there is no action in 90 days, the commission can charter review can reconvene on a ballot measure in the upcoming year. That's what happened to the hearing exam. So there are some ways to put some teeth. Okay, Article 11, Subcommittee B is headed by Sue Ford, includes Glenn Wiggins, Connie Bouvet, Rod Fleck, Nola Judd, Ted Miller, and Maggie Roth, and that has been distributed. You all have a copy of the Article 11 meeting. Okay, so Sue?
Nola Judd was excused, all of the other members were present. The committee unanimously agreed to call for an action item and move the following forward to the commission for consideration at the public hearings in response to testimony given by citizens. Shall the charter be amended to provide that term of office for Home Rule Charter Commission begin on January 1st, following the election held the previous November for a period of 1 year through December 31st, with the first meeting to be held within the first 2 weeks of January. That would solve a lot of problems that we face right now with our initial meetings falling in December right at Christmas time. The committee also unanimously agreed to call for an action item and move the following forward to the commission for consideration at public hearings. Shall the charter be amended to provide for election of the Home Rule Charter Commission to take place every 4 years, with the next election to be held in 2019? And then third, the committee unanimously agreed to call for an action item and move the following forward to the commission for consideration at the public hearing. Shall the charter be amended to create a new section, 11.10.10, as follows: no elected county official, administrator, or charter exempt employee may serve as a member of the Charter Review Commission. And then the committee unanimously agreed to forward the proposed idea by Steve Burke for a Charter Enforcement Commission to the commission as a whole for discussion. And we adjourned at 7 o'clock. We held that meeting on April 7th at the Bella Rosa at 6 p.m.
And no further meetings or sessions?
Yes, we do.
Okay,
Are there any other members of that committee who want to make a comment?
I wasn't there, so I really don't want to comment on that particularly, but I was concerned about an agreement that we had earlier where a minority report would not be allowed unless there were 2 voices, and some of our committees are only 3 people or 4 people, and I think that they still have the opportunity for a minority report if we remove that stigma.
Well, the point is that if a minority report is only a single individuals always have a right at the commission level here to raise an issue and ask for its discussion.
Thank you.
Okay. Ted, excuse me, Ken?
Yeah, I just had a question about the last item here about bringing to the charter, the commission as a whole, enforcement commission, charter enforcement commission. What is that? Can we talk?
Steve, do you want to discuss that?
We drafted up a proposed chart, what a charter enforcement commission could look like, and it's been sent out for people to review.
Okay, I'm sure I got it.
Trish.
So would that be one of those things that would be a issue?
Yes.
Okay. I can study it. Okay. Any other questions? Okay, next is Article 12, which is headed by Glenn Wiggins. It includes Sue Ford, Connie Bouvet, Mike Doherty, Rod Fleck, and Steve Burke.
Okay, that committee was not able to meet because we wanted Rod to be there. It's now been scheduled for the 28th of this month. Prior to a meeting on a subject which is likely coming up from this committee, having to do with the transfer of county forest board lands, reclaims of county forest board lands to the county. And we wanted Rod's participation in that. He's coming to town for some discussion of that. Rod, maybe you want to comment at all about that?
Rod?
Well, no, I'll be there. I'm coming in at 4 o'clock and at 5:30. I was asked by the NOTAC Board of Directors to talk to them about the issue DNRs are rear agent and whether or not the county's owed money from timber that's not been harvested that was required to be offered for sale. So my attitude is, well, if I'm already going to be in there, I'll just, and Jim Jones won't get a bill for me coming in on Tuesday, so that'll make him happy.
Yeah. So anyway, we'll have a report after that meeting by the board.
Okay. So, any other comments, questions before we go for a stand-up break for a few minutes? When we come back, Mike, you want to do your page now or when we come back?
Come back.
So when we come back, Mike will do his page, and then we can have...
Trish, could you email me Mike's page?
It was the one that he had last week.
That Trish has a complete packet of everything that was discussed tonight, one is the executive committee meeting, which was held April 17th. There's a report from Article 1, a report from Article 2, a report from 4A, a report from 6A, and on the back side of that is 11A, Article 8, a report from Article 11. Now, am I missing anybody's report? And then we have the page that Mike is going to be discussing, after finding the page, Mike. Before me. Mike, do you have another page? There, oh, I can use this one, okay, but I need one.
Trish's handouts at the very back
Okay.
this evening.
Okay, I need one of Mike's papers to put in here for Trish.
Mine is this.
Yeah, that's it. Thank you. Okay, so, Trish, this is the complete packet of everything that was submitted in writing directly to the commission. So, I think you can go ahead and
Was this the same one that you did last week?
doesn't have to be part of the minutes.
I'm just making sure.
Okay, all right, so,
I'm just making sure I didn't have to get up over or something.
okay, to make it clear, there are members of the audience who wondered what all these reports look like, and so the normal and accustomed thing is that Trish would wait until the next minutes come out and the reports would be appended to that minute. But she can also make a special dispensation, go ahead and post all of those reports online now, so they'll be available if anybody wants to look at it. Does that sound reasonable? Thank you, Trish. So Mike, your page.
Okay, so last time we talked about this at the end of the subcommittee report, so it's basically the same discussion. So having listened to public comment primarily, looked at the written record also, these are some issues that relate just generally to open, transparent government. Because most of us, when we talk to the electorate, we talked about that issue. So these were some specifics. And I consider this a draft. I'm hoping that it could move along a bit, maybe to the prosecuting attorney's office tonight. But if people have either major issue headings or subheadings or examples fitting under some of these issue areas, I'd be certainly glad to amend this, as I mentioned last time. So, for instance, Open Public Meeting Act. Now, a couple of ideas that have come from the public several times. One is using public access channel television to videotape Board of Commissioner work sessions and the business meetings. And a second idea was that the clerk of the board would produce minutes of the Board of Commissioners work sessions, similar as she does to the business meeting. Now, there could be other ideas under that topic. Under the Public Records Act, the processing of the investigation of the DCD department. It was handled, I think, rather succinctly in the paper, only really 2 articles. And then what was the outcome? So people have asked me for months and months, well, whatever happened to that? Or was anything done about that? So personally, I would just like some documentation of that as an example of how public records requests are handled in Clallam County. Fourthly, ethics code has come up a couple times in the last meeting, once or twice before that. So personally there, I would just say that it's only a few pages, so if each member had a copy of the Code of Ethics, and I believe, Trish, did you run that off last time, Trish?
I did.
I think she did, so you may have that in your packet. And then if this is passed on to the prosecutor, possibly a summary of the RCW that relates to much of the same subject matters, Chapter 42. So for public officials, public employees, there's our separate sections, but generally handles the same thing. But since we have a specific Code of Ethics in Clallam County as a result of the Board of Freeholders and the charter as it was dropped by the public, I thought that would be important for us to understand also more about that. And again, these topics probably don't rise to most members'
scale as far as making them proposals for charter modifications. Now, there could be people look into this, but my thought was in the letter of recommendations, which we talked about in January, some of these items could be included as recommendations to the Board of Commissioners. Number 5 was the settlement of claims against Clallam County. Millions of dollars are involved in settlements with the county over various things, torts, personal, all kinds of things. So over the years, people ask me, whatever happened to that case X? Many of these are run through the risk pool. Some few go to trial. So I thought, well, that would be educational because millions of dollars are involved. So the process, how that's handled through a number of 4 or 5 different avenues, and then how are the Board of Commissioners advised on how those settlements are being handled and the total amounts. There was one example where over $3 million was not of knowledge to the Board of Commissioners, and yet the risk pool primarily, but other contributors paid into that. So I thought, well, that would be enlightening for charter review members, and then some kind of a summary for all of it. Another one I thought about, in almost every meeting I've thought about adding to this, was the citizens grand jury. So that, again, as with these 5 items, that could be a 6th item where the prosecuting attorney's office would be asked to do a quick memo. And if you remember, Mark Nichols pretty much briefed us on the Open Public Meeting Act and the public records process. But he didn't have an example of particularly the public records, so that's why I left that on him. But the citizens grand jury and or an ombudsman. Now, over the period of years, particularly when the Board of Freeholders looked at how to handle citizen complaints about their government, we looked into an ombudsman. It came very close to proposing an office ombudsman as a very part-time, maybe retired judge for Clallam County, but at the end of the day, that was not recommended in the first charter. So again, we could, if people feel, gee, we would like a little memo on either citizen grand jury and or the current system, how it works, and ombudsman. And a couple of European countries use this as a way to give citizens a way to feel they got a second bite at the apple about their government practices. So anyway, these are some items, mostly from the public record, that I'd like to refer and take the prosecuting attorney's office up on their offer to do some research on these items, these types of items for us. And then back would come that item. And I considered a draft. If people come up with some other subject matter to add to this list, great. Other examples within issue areas, great.
Ken?
Yeah, one thought I had, and I apologize in advance because this may not be a completely evolved thought, but in response to this and thinking about a number of the other issues that have been brought up regarding transparency and accountability, and even maybe related to the citizens grand jury, would be to and what I wrote down maybe is a little too specific just to the example of a DCD record, you know, the claims against an officer or claims about an officer, but maybe we need a subsection. Maybe it's 12.55, or maybe it's a subsection of 12.6, but that would be headed something like investigations of officers or claims against the county. And we talked about that briefly in 12.5, but I actually outlined a procedure for when that action is initiated, how it plays out. So it's spelled out very clearly what the, what it takes to initiate that action, what the procedures that will be followed specifically, which would include public disclosure, or maybe even a final subsection that actually talks about how all of the findings, all of the procedures, everything that comes out of that is, required to be publicly disclosed in some specific format. This thing about the citizens grand jury, just as an aside, I mean, my research on that seems to suggest that a totally independent citizens grand jury has absolutely no legal weight, but maybe this would be a way to initiate the courts initiating a citizens grand jury for specific causes or actions, kind of thing. So kind of a loose thought there. I'm not a lawyer, so.
Well, and I didn't want to get into this, but another aspect of this that I thought about would be to suggest, after this briefing, the state law or the local ordinances and the county policies, because in the case of termination investigations, there is county policy that goes beyond the ordinances that the county commissioners adopt. There's a big policy manual, and so there are parts of that would relate, and that's probably the bulk of the answer I'm guessing we would get back from the prosecuting attorney, because it does get into that.
And that's a good point, because I think we want to make sure we keep policy out of the charter, because the charter is really a set of bylaws, the way I see it. Maybe that's not quite correct either, but that's a good point. What I'm suggesting might be more policy.
And the tail end of this would be
Mike, before you, I'm going to ask Ron to ask a question.
Well, you know, I don't know how many claims are settled, but how many have confidentiality provisions in them that you can't disclose anyway?
That would be part of the discussion.
You know, I mean, let's face it, a number of lawsuits always now have confidentiality provisions.
Sure.
Rod Flex raising his hand out there in the corner.
I have a really hard problem asking the county prosecutor to write a memo explaining how the various claims against the county are settled and when and where disclosure would be appropriate. I think there's a process in place. If the Charter Review Commission is that interested in understanding that aspect of county government, then maybe we take a vote, see if there's the 8 who want to do this, and ask the county prosecutor to come back and answer a few set of questions. But you know, Mark made it pretty clear that we needed to ask him early on about potential ballot language in order to where we could get everything in ready for the ballot by our August 4th deadline. I just don't like having this, well, let's have a discussion and a memo about something on a settlement of a claim, especially if it's a claim that's pending or was recently settled. I think some of those may have significant rules or probably agreements that we need to make sure we're not walking into a situation where we suddenly cost the county even more money.
And all of that could be addressed by the prosecutor, I believe, Rod. The other part, if board members...
For what purpose, I guess, is what I'm trying to understand. Why would we ask the prosecutor to write us a memo about how they settle things in order to create a situation where we will have more questions so we can write a second memo?
Could be done in one-page memo, how the process of settlements with the county is done. There could be a paragraph on the risk pool with examples that have already been settled, nothing pending. It just, there's an awful lot of money at stake, and it's not a very public process.
But that implies then that there weren't executive sessions on those settlements with the Board of Commissioners.
And there were not. In some cases, there were not. I think there should have been. So,
I'm going to call on Steve.
I just think, I think if we forward something to the county prosecutor, we need to have it framed a little more specific than this. I think we need to ask them a specific question on something like this, but, and I'm willing to help with doing the due diligence to get it to it, but I don't think he has the time, nor do we want to give him the time to give him just a broad, have him do a broad response back on something like Oklahoma Public Meetings Act or the Public Records Act. I mean, it's thousands of pages in the state RCW. I think if we have a specific question on the Public Records Act, so let's ask them, but let's not just have them give a dissertation on the Public Records Act, how it relates to our county.
So
I'm going to call on Noah's question, and then we'll go back to Mike.
I'm wondering if we have not already received from the prosecuting attorney's office the information for the ethics code and the doctrine of incompatible offices. I believe these came from the commissioner's office. He has the date of April the 6th for chapter 3.01 on ethics, and then the MRSC information on holding 2 public offices, and that's dated April the 19th. I'm not sure if that gives you all that you were talking about, but I believe those came from that office.
Yes.
Okay, so Mike?
So yes, that's good material, but it's an example of how relatively succinct I think these requests can be, because MSRC produces summaries of this. So if you go to the municipal research site, which the prosecuting attorney can do, it'll save them a lot of work product. So
I think like one thing that would help if perhaps at the next meeting you bring your issues framed in a specific question.
well, and if Steve wants to help, I'd be glad to own that. And if anybody has any other issues they've heard from the public and they wonder, well, how does county government work? Here's a chance to do it. And again, it's probably not going to elevate to the level of a change in the charter, but maybe some suggestions reflecting what we heard from the public were concerns to the county commission.
And it might be helpful if you, next time also in your list, could flesh out a little bit about the idea of an ombudsman, if the freeholders thought about it, putting it in the charter and didn't get in, and how you envision it might or might not work, so.
Well, and I'd be glad to work on that. If there's a consensus that, yeah, let's polish this up and forward it to the prosecutor. Same way with the grand jury. We've heard over and over some statements about that, but do we want to put into writing that we'd like a summary of how this works? Because my recollection is the one time Mark did address it, the prosecutor did address it, he mentioned the current jury system, the current court system, vis-a-vis a citizen's grand jury. So we may want more information to distinguish between those two.
Anybody, I'll come to you in just a second. No, anybody else hasn't asked a question? Okay, Nola?
I would like to recommend or move or whatever that the citizen grand jury one with a memo on what the current system is and how it works would be an appropriate thing for us to get from Mark at this point, because we've got at least 2 of our subcommittees that are already delving into that quite deeply. And I think it would be helpful for them as well as for the body as a whole if we did have that go to him.
So are you making a motion?
Yes, I made that motion.
And your
That
motion
one
is?
item, I think we're prepared, we've done homework on, I think we could ask that.
Could you just restate the motion?
I move that we submit to Mark Nichols a request for a citizen grand jury memo of what the current system and how it works.
Well, we currently don't have a citizens grand jury.
Right.
We have a criminal grand jury system, but we don't have a citizens grand jury system.
This is really confusing.
Okay, wait a minute, we have a motion. If
Okay.
there's no second, then we can move on to other
Oh, come on,
discussion.
I'll second it.
Okay, so Linda second. So now we're in the discussion of the motion itself.
Well, I've really been, like I said just a few minutes ago, I've done a little bit of research, it's all on the internet, so you know how truthful that all is, but what I've been hearing, it seems like, is mostly suggested from public comment, is a independent citizens grand jury, which means the citizen can just form their own grand jury. And my research says that a grand jury formed that way has absolutely no legal weight or bearing whatsoever.
Oh, but it does.
Oh, but it does.
Well, it doesn't actually.
Scalia.
Please, we're having a discussion at the commission level. Please. Regardless of, that's what I found. At the same time, a grand jury, by definition, is a jury appointed from the citizenship by a court or a judge. So I think if we're going to ask the prosecutor anything, we need some clarification of what we're talking about, is my point. Because, to me, it doesn't make any sense the way it's been talked about. I feel like some of the times it's talked about in the sense that a grand jury does typically function, and sometimes it seems to be talked about in what I found on the internet being defined as an independent citizens grand jury. So I'd like to make sure we know what we're asking and maybe have some clarification of what these things, maybe one of the lawyers in the room can clarify this for me, but that's what I found looking around.
So I have Ron out there, and then we have Ron. So your lawyers are stepping up to the plate here. Okay,
With regard to Ken's question, I can't tell you what exactly is being asked for because I haven't seen a proposal. What I've seen is, and what I've heard in the testimony is, we need to consider adopting a citizens grand jury that will look into every job to somehow investigate. Tonight's testimony, for example, was investigating a state patrol officer, which the county would have no jurisdiction over whatsoever. And I am very confused as an attorney, trying to understand what the form, function, and jurisdiction of this would be, because I can go and look at a grand jury system in the RCW, I can look at a whistleblower system, I can look at a system for a writ of mandamus or other things to do enforcement mechanisms. All those have costs, all those have challenges, but I can't find within the Washington framework or rubric a citizen's grand jury. And asking the prosecutor to explain something, I think he's going to be very hard pressed from the record we have available to us to identify what it is people are asking for.
Ron Bell?
Well, I agree with Rod entirely on the jurisdictional issue regarding the state trooper, but a motion that might work to the prosecuting attorney is I would make a motion that the prosecutor issue an opinion as to the under the Washington State Constitution, the constitutionality of an independent citizens grand jury.
So are you asking Nola if she'll amend her motion?
That could be
There's a motion on the floor, so if you
That could be a friendly amendment.
I would be willing to accept that as a friendly amendment if you remove the word independent.
Okay, because that's the reason I included that was because that's most of the public testimony tonight was on an independent citizens grand jury. So that's why I included it.
So you're not accepting his language?
Not with that one.
Okay.
So any further discussion? Ted, and then I'll make a comment.
I just wanted to comment that I can't support the motion for the simple reason that the motion is invalid without a precise definition of what we mean by a grand jury. I've heard about 1,000 different definitions, and I'd really like to know exactly what we're going to ask the prosecuting attorney to do. Otherwise, he could spend the rest of the year trying to find it. And for example, what is an independent grand jury? What is a non-independent grand jury? What is a citizen's grand jury, etc.? There's all sorts of different kinds. And I don't think we're anywhere near ready to ask Martin Nichols to weigh in on this without a far more precise definition of exactly what we want.
And I would just say I concur that I think it is too, at this point, maybe an idea worth discussing, but it's too vague right now to ask our attorney to spend any time and energy on until it's defined.
Can I call the question?
Okay, question's been called for. Those in favor of ending debate, raise your hand, please.
Any debate, aye.
Okay.
Ending
We
debate.
called the question, so we have to vote on ending debate.
You have to do a vote.
So we voted the majority. Okay, so now we're on to the question of the motion itself. Those in favor? Those opposed? Okay, thank you. Okay. Okay, next, let's see. I wanted, before we finish with this discussion about subcommittee reports, I just want to put out a thought for, yes, sir.
Chair, so back to the list, is that just in advance for a while again?
What I think would be helpful if your page, if you would bring it back framed in specific questions.
Steve, you want to help do that?
I will help, I won't spearhead it.
Well, it'd be good to have a second or third.
Yeah.
Okay. So there's an open invitation
Okay.
by Mike and Steve. Just contact Mike, do you want to be the
Sure.
contact person?
Sure. And
Between
if there's
now-
any other content to go on the list, let me know.
Between now and the next meeting, if you want to try and flesh this out into more specific questions. Okay. I just wanted to, thinking about our next meeting, which I'm looking forward to, I think it'll be very interesting. And just remember that we basically will be dealing with these issues, and correct me if I'm wrong, but we'll have sort of 3 layers. One is, what issues do we want to put out as things we'd like to hear from at the public hearing? Second is, are there items that would be recommendations to the commissioners? I don't know if those need to go out for a public hearing, if that's a separate list. And then the third thing is that there are housekeeping measures. I serve of the mind that the charter can be amended in a variety of ways, and that if there are certain departments in the county that have a need for some minor housekeeping language change, the commissioners should help them do that by putting a housekeeping measure on the ballot. I don't know that we need to clutter up our ballot with housekeeping, but that will be for you to decide. So those will be the three things we're looking at, and which ones bubble up to a public hearing will be up to you to decide. But we may next week, next meeting, talking about setting aside recommendation of commissioners and the housekeeping measures as a separate item. I don't know. We'll just keep those three tiers in mind when the discussion's coming up. So are there any further comments or questions about the subcommittee reports or what we're doing next time we meet before we move on to public comment? Okay. All right, well, anyway, the committee reports, well, this is subcommittee, so I'm reading from the agenda. So the committee reports, we all know, are due by no later than Friday, the 1st. Okay, Nola, you had a question before we move on.
I was just wondering if we had an independent thought, would we bring that next week or would we wait for public hearings?
If you have an item that you'd like to raise that you think could bubble up to an issue that the public hearing, feel free to send that in as an individual, and it will be posted along with all of the committee reports. We've said that all along. There are two ways to do it, through the committees or as an individual. I would hope it'd be framed around a specific issue, and then you'll have the right to raise that.
And that should be done by the May 4th.
That should be, hopefully, yes, come out. It'd be helpful if all of that comes out on the 1st, so we will know what we're looking at. It gives us all time to think about it, and our own minds begin to create some questions.
And that also goes for the recommendations for the commissioners as well. Is that correct?
Well, I say that because some of these reports have had recommendations from commissioners. So when we get these reports, we probably want to pull some of those out.
Right, but that could be a separate report by one of us about something that we should give to the commissioners.
It could be.
Okay.
Sure. All right. Any further questions? I think we're doing fine. Okay, so now we're opening up for public comment again. I don't have the, okay, Gary, John? When you get the podium, if you just sign in, I put the sheet back out there. Have people signed up for the second round?
Yeah. Don't worry, it's fine.
Okay, well then if you just hand me the sheet, Jerry, I'll call you.
Not yet.
You better sign up.
Yes, sign up, I'll call you.
Is that after Ed? Which one's the list?
It's at the bottom.
Yeah.
The next blank space.
Okay. Right, sign. Have a long street, Mason.
Thank you. Okay, so public comments. We have Stephanie Nolan. Okay. Stephanie, you have for an address 2345.
Okay,
What is the rest of your address?
East Third Avenue.
East Third, is that PA as well? Pardon?
PA.
Okay, thank you.
Good evening, Commissioners. Glad to be with you again. So I hope I'm going to answer some questions because you have heard from several people, other people tonight, regarding that independent community grand jury. We went to that name specifically because it would cover all of Clallam County without calling it a county. We are a community, and independent, you'll hear a little bit more about that as we go. So, when you say Fifth Amendment, in regards to the Constitution of the United States, what do you think of? Most people think of it as someone using it to avoid self-incrimination. I'm going to take the fifth, right? However, it's not well known in most places that the Fifth Amendment to the Constitution of the United States holds that no one shall be made to stand trial lest they be indicted by a grand jury. So many of us here might agree that we may have gotten away and or ignored this amendment to the Constitution. However, we can get back to the original intent on a local, county level by implementing an independent community grand jury. The Justice Restoration Group has put together some preliminary suggestions for ballot language for your consideration regarding this independent community grand jury. But first, I want you to know that in a future meeting, and I'm so glad you voted down not to go forward with Mark yet, I want you to know that this group will provide you with an example of organizational format and some of the necessary processes that will work for a successful implementation of an independent community grand jury. A few examples of what will be in that, the sections will include purpose, empanelment, composition, qualifications, selection, term, and more. That's an example of what we're putting together now for you for the next meeting. So we came up with some suggested ballot language, and it reads as follows. The Clallam County Charter Review Commission has proposed amending the Clallam County Home Rule Charter by adding an additional article called, I'll call it 14, Article 14, Independent Community Grand Jury. Shall there be formed an independent community grand jury assembled from the residents to investigate and independently determine if a case should go to trial, and to act as a balance of power opposed to a government or government officials that attempts to ignore or disobey the law. The duties include, but are not limited to, investigating the operations of county government, researching matters of civic concern, and inquiring into public offenses. We heard some of those from Dale and from Alan tonight. After hearing, examining, and investigating the evidence before it, the independent grand jury may, in its discretion, issue an indictment against the principal. And then I have quoted, which I will leave with Trish, some RCWs and some other cases. So in closing, after presenting the complete vision for the independent community grand jury, we will be asking you, the commissioners, to put a new home rule charter article to the voters on the ballot in November. We would like to see this independent community grand jury formed to provide the accountability we all want. Does that help?
Bob Ford?
Bob Ford, 67 Nicky Lane, Spring, Washington. Since I've been attending these different meetings of this commission, I've heard maybe a half a dozen people speak to retaining or going back to the idea of an appointed DCD director. I have yet to hear anyone say that the elected process doesn't work. One lady tonight commented on returning to the appointed process, and later on in her talk, she talked about the democratic process. In my mind, the two are diametrically opposed. The inherent flaw in the appointed process is the ability to reward someone monetarily or politically by appointing them. The democratic process would be, and there are many voices who tout democracy instead of the republic that we are. The elected process allows for the individual running for the office to tout their own qualifications. The individual we have in that position now is, in my mind, ultimately qualified as an architect, as I recall. And she's eminently qualified to do what she does. The qualifications are up to the electorate. They'll decide, as we do in all. I would like to imagine what this body would look like if each one of you were appointed instead of elected. I wonder what that would look like. So the elected process, in fact, is, in my view, working quite well. No one that has come to this podium and advocated to return to an appointed process, not one in the half a dozen or 8 that I've heard, not one has said that the process currently doesn't work, or that we've had individuals that are unqualified. It simply isn't there. And for this body to consider that as a proposal again for the voter to vote on is, in my view, absurd. Historically, this thing works just fine. If it ain't broke, you ought not try to fix it. Thank you.
Next is Ed Bowen.
Commissioners, once again, Ed Bowen, P.O. Box 111, Clallam Bay. So going over the subcommittee reporting tonight, I really enjoyed this. I probably understood 99% of everything that was reported tonight, so that's a big plus for me. I want to go over some key things. I think I captured out of the committee on videotaping that it was the group's consensus to go forward to the commissioners with it. Okay, got that one. Group 6 or Article 6. I'm concerned a bit about what I heard tonight about and elected officials in regards to the budget and how that would work. I'm kind of want to see how this gets developed, that particular aspect. Not I'm against it or for it. I just want to see how that gets developed a little bit better because it sounds kind of goofy right now. One point I need to bring up in regards to 11A, talked about 3 in each district, 3 CR commissioners, and that seems counterintuitive to the idea of another group wanting to go with 5, increasing the 5 board county commissioners. Might seem simplistic in nature, but it seems like there's a disconnect there. We want to go up on one side and come down on another. When really, this group, the size of this group, is a good cross-section of the people of the county. I very am intrigued by this idea on other matters going before the Clallam County Board reviewing recommendations. And I would like to see how that gets worded out, and I'm really for that. I mean, that sounds really good to me. Under 11B, the group reported this Charter Enforcement Commission. I believe, if I understood correctly, they didn't do anything in the group, that they're just going to submit what was written up.
Yeah, 12 is going to address it.
Okay. Then in 12, I didn't want to make a comment to the DNR piece about returning lands. Something that doesn't get talked about a lot, but DNR has a bad practice in this part of the county, or this part of the state, and that's what they do with their thinning products. We have a biomass plant here, and none of those products wind up at the biomass plant because DNR doesn't want to deal with such what they call small-scale product off of the forest. Excuse me. You know, if DNR can't do it, I think we can as a county. And last but not least, I really do appreciate it. Thank you very much for going beyond the agenda, the adopted minutes and getting these reports put on the website tonight. I think that's going to help a lot of us read the details at home, the video, and then we can try to understand a little bit more what you talked about in your report tonight. Thank you.
And Jerry Sin.
I may not have a comment, I need to ask a question, and it's partly because of a lag with when the documentation is available and all that. Was there a Article 14 proposal made at the last meeting? Something about budgets, I thought.
There have been a couple of things that there's great uncertainty as to where they fit in the charter, like the one that Steve just
Article
mentioned.
14 is the enforcement.
Yeah.
Yes. But
And we put that in 12.
But we didn't have an Article 14.
Okay, so then I will make a comment then. See, with human beings to keep adding to a system or a process to fix problems. So you want to add more to it, more to it. And what it does is it builds more complexity and opens you up for even more problems. The example I'll use is the budget. This is not because I have a strong opinion one way or the other, but under Article 9, there's a budget process listed in there, and there's representation of all the people involved in the budget to have dialogue, discussion, and reach agreement, or try to reach agreement on the budget. So before I think we change the structure of the budget process, I think you need to examine, is the existing process not effective, or is it not being implemented correctly? And that's, I think, an important question. Or what will happen is we'll end up, instead of a 22-page charter, with a 500-page charter, and I don't think we want to do that. So that would be my comment on that. And I'm anxious to read the documentation from tonight. Very good discussion. Thank you.
Okay. John, you see your hand?
I'll be glad to sign that sheet,
All right.
right after the meeting. I'm John Merton Mars, and I live at 111 Heron Cove Road, Port Angeles, which is actually Lake Southern. I think that I'm discussing a different topic than he just did, but I agree with him that anything that causes confusion is not good for governance. And I rise on the point of putting a right of privacy in the county charter. The right of privacy was inferred from the Constitution, from the federal Constitution, by Justice Brandeis more than 100 years ago. And in that time, it has become a multi-layered area in the law. It has been carried out through case law. It involves the media. It involves the right of privacy for people's images being used by other people for commercial purposes without their permission. It involves trespass. It is just a complete area of specialty in the law as I understand it. And I don't think there is any reason for the county, for Clallam County, to put it in their charter. And I think that to do so would only cause confusion. Thank you.
Okay. Anyone else who did not sign up but would like to speak?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Give me your name and your address.
Yes. My name is Charles Kearney. My wife is Linda Crane. And I moved here a few years ago, and I'm surprised to see that we're having a struggle with what's right and who's right according to what is law and what is not. But I would like to apologize for the offense. I was intimidated by the uncertainty about the law constitutionally. It exists. And to just clear up, we're all here to get at the truth and help each other understand it and work with it. I might be able to share something that I've learned about it, and that is that it's basically very simple. We have rights that are inalienable, and infringement on those rights is unconstitutional, and that is where the citizens' grand jury finds and decides whether someone's rights are being violated. Any rights, human rights, inalienable rights, your human rights, your God-given rights, the only rights you have. These are uncompromised rights. You either are able to have them or they're taken away from you. We're real close to losing a key that gets us out of that box this government, this world government has got us in. Aside from that comment, it's very simple. If you're going to a trial and you're going to be judged for something, you need a committee or a citizens' grand jury that will consider whether your rights have been violated or not. And it's constitutionally described as citizens' grand jury. And it's not only a suggestion to be able to function in that, but it is constitutionally required that an office be given for that grand jury. And I would like to see that provided for all of your rights to be restored and accepted and recognized. And most every county and every state in this country in the last 3 years is collectively, like wildfire, restored this. Grand jury is coming back, not the one that fell off by the wayside because of some senatorial misunderstanding years ago. This is all we have. And this group has really dug in and followed some people who have gotten into this and got this started. And it's about time that you didn't treat it like a hat in the attic. This is your rights, and this is the committee constitutionally that will enable you to function by that very baseline law. Your rights, right or wrong. And I thank you. If you don't understand it, look into it. There are a number of websites I can suggest, but they're available. Thank you very much.
Anyone else? Seeing none, we'll close the public comment period, and before we adjourn, we have good of the order. So we'll go around. Glenn, do you have anything from the Linda? Barb? Sue? Zola? Maggie? Mike? Ken? Rod Fleck?
Rivers and Ocean Film Festival on Saturday night. I'm sure I'll need to make the drive out to Forks, so we'll see you there.
I knew I could rely on you for a good of the order announcement. Okay, Ron Bell?
No.
John? No. Okay, and we will see you all on May 4th.
I
And
have a little something. The auditor has an agreement for the board tomorrow to produce a builder's pamphlet.
Oh. Okay, thank you. And so I